This one sucks to make, fellas. This one sucks to make. This is probably the worst part of playing fantasy, of being involved in this space, is that these players run into injury. We're not going to do a lot of cuts on this video. I'm not even going to hop into a nice intro. This is going to be a video where we break down the Cam Akers injury. Cam Akers, it came out this morning. He tore his ACL. Or no, he didn't tear his ACL. He tore his Achilles. And that's a scary injury. We haven't really seen a running back come back from one of these kinds of injuries and play well. You know, it's kind of a fucking death sentence, the Achilles injuries, because I want to say that's like what, like the back of your ankle. That's kind of like an explosive part of your body. And you need that as a running back. You know, when you're making cuts and jumping up field and winning with explosion, you need your Achilles to be at a full capacity. And it's not looking great for Akers. I saw this tweet by Kyle FF Recon, and he said, of the recent Achilles tears for RBs, there's been 11 total since 2010. 2 have returned to play the following season. 6 never saw an NFL touch again. 6 had 196 plus touch season prior to the tear, and 0 had more than 85 touches in their comeback year. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's looking really rough for Akers. And I know a lot of those guys on that list aren't super talented. You know, they're not the kinds of running backs that Akers is. And I know that there's some optimism. You know, we have the future of medicine. You know, it's probably, things are probably advancing at this point. He's a younger back. And I think that he will eventually be fine. But that brings us to what we should do with Cam Akers in Dynasty. And initially, when I first sat down to write down what I wanted to do for this video, I was initially leaning, okay, if you're in a productive struggle, you're punting 2021, maybe go send a low ball offer. Maybe go send, like, I don't know. I was going to say like a first, but now I wouldn't even want to pay a first. Now that I'm looking at things, I wouldn't even want to pay a first for Akers. If you're going to pay for Akers on a productive struggle team, it'd have to be something stupid. It'd have to be like Michael Pittman in a second. I would do, like, you know what I mean? Like a face planner plus a second for Akers. I would do something like that. But I think the consensus should be that we probably want to sell Cam Akers. And it's because the Achilles injuries, we haven't seen it for RBs where they come back and they're full ready to go. He could be a shell of himself in 2022. He could never hit an RB1 season, Cam Akers, and it sucks to say, but that's just kind of the reality of these Achilles injuries. And Scott Connor, who's like someone I really respect in the Dynasty industry, he's probably one of the sharpest guys out there. He doesn't get as many followers as he should have, but he has a podcast, Dynasty and Chill, one of the sharpest dudes in the game. And he kind of brought up a good point with Akers' value, because let's say pre-injury, so we're talking like literally just yesterday, Akers' value had 2 components. A lot of these young running backs like DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, they have 2 components. The first component of their value is going to be the future points that they score for your fantasy team. That's what you have on every single running back. But the other component was the value that you have in a 22-year-old running back with upside. That's like, those one are rare. They're very scarce. So that brings a lot of value. There's, you know, the upside around it. There's this unknown of, oh, what could they do in year 2? Now that we're losing out on year 2, you're losing that other component. You know, we're losing out on year 2. Year 3, he might be a shell of himself. And now his value is only his future points that he's going to score for your fantasy team. There's no longer this kind of like youth and longevity aspect to his value. So for me, his value after this is probably going to be somewhere in the David Montgomery, Chris Carson range. You know, guys that don't have the Akers, the Gibson kind of like shine to them, and they're just going to put up RB2, fringe RB1 fantasy points for your team the next 1, 2, 3 years. You know, that's going to be kind of his value. So for me, if I have Cam Akers, I just did it in one of my leagues. I end up being completely honest. This is what I'm doing with Akers in every single one of my leagues I have him. I would be selling for a future first as soon as possible and calling it a day. I would go out there, offer him for a 2022 first, a 2023 first, whatever you want to do from every single team in your league, and see if somebody bites. I don't think that his value will ever fully rebound. We've lost his youth at this point. His value is going to come down to a running back that's only hinging on his future value, like future point score, like a Chris Carson. But we're not even going to see those points until 2022 at the absolute earliest. So this feels like a square move to me. You know, I think that at first I was like, oh, maybe it's sharp to go buy Akers. You know, he'll probably be fine. But because it's an Achilles injury, if it was like an ACL or a meniscus or like something where we've seen running backs come back and be fine, I'd actually be more into buying him. But because it's an Achilles, I don't want to have him on my roster. I'd be selling as soon as possible. And I know that doesn't feel great. and you're kind of just losing out on that. But I mean, when you really think about it contextually, that 2022 first could just become Breece Hall or Isaiah Spiller or one of the cool quarterbacks or the wide receivers in next year's class, or 2020 if it's a 2023 first. I'd rather have, if we're talking about Cam Akers in 2023 or like a Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, a Tank Bigsby, any of those running backs at the top, along with the quarterbacks in that draft class, I take a 2023 draft pick. So then that brings us to Darrell Henderson. As I said before with Cam Akers, I'd be looking to sell for a first, and if you're a productive struggle, maybe send out a low ball offer, but I'm talking like low ball. I'm talking, like I said, like Pittman in a second, something super low. Now, with Darrell Henderson, now we're looking to do, what should we do with Darrell Henderson in Dynasty? And if you have him, I think I would just be looking to cash out. I'd probably be looking to sell him for a future first, whether that's 2022 or 2023. Henderson's about to turn 24. He's going into year 3, so there's not much upside. So he doesn't have that young back upside like a Cam Akers. So he's probably as well in that Myles Gaskin, Chris Carson range, you know? So I don't think that there's ever a scenario where he comes out and becomes like an RB1 in dynasty value. So he just seems like a guy like Myles Gaskin, Chris Carson, like I said. So I think you should sell for a future first if you're not looking to win. If you can't sell for a future first and you're like a contending team, I don't mind just riding him out. You know, you just got a free RB2 with RB1 upside that you drafted in double-digit rounds. So you could just go out there, chill, and let him sort of ride you to a championship. Now, I will say, I think the worst move you could possibly make is buying Darrell Henderson. His value is at the highest it'll ever be right now today, and especially if you're an Akers owner. If you're down bad because Akers got hurt, don't go out there and trade for Darrell Henderson. Don't hit up the Darrell Henderson owner. That's not the optimal move, because if Akers, like, Henderson's just not a good replacement. Whatever price you're going to pay for Darrell Henderson, just pay it for a different running back. Go buy Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler for like a little bit more than what you could buy Henderson for. He's not going to replace Akers' value one for one. Now that brings us to Darrell Henderson's seasonal value. And I'm probably going to update the rankings on Patreon this weekend. I'll probably do like an emergency update of the rankings on Patreon down below in the description. And I think that he's probably going to end up around RB20 for me once I update them. And this is still a great situation. They have a great O-line. I want to say they were like top 5 in run blocking last year. They bring in Stafford. They're going to score plenty of points. And I will say that I've been drafting so much Darrell Henderson that I'm probably going to cool off for a little bit. You know, I think that I've stored up so much value on Darrell Henderson. He's literally my most owned running back on Underdog. I've been getting him around like the 12th, 13th, 11th round, in that range, like 20% of my drafts. So I've made such a profit on Henderson. I don't really see the need to go draft him, because I think once his ADP comes to this point, there's not much value to be had with him, because he's probably going to be in that Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin tier. He might even be a little bit more overpriced than that. He might even sneak up into like the David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs range. And I don't even like running backs in that area anyways. And I think that you could see the Rams bring in Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, but it wouldn't really change my view on Henderson too much. I still think he'll probably just be the RB1 for the team. They'll score a bunch of points, and he'll be solid. That's all I can really say. Do I think that he has like top 5 RB upside? Not really. But I also think that I got some questions in the Discord asking, what should we do with Matt Stafford, Woods, Kupp, Higbee? And I think that they're all going to be fine in seasonal. It might even help them a little bit in seasonal, because they might skew a little bit more pass than run now. It might give them a little bit more run volume than they would have had with Akers. So I'd say it's not like a super clear positive for the pass catchers on this team, but I think that it's at the very least not a negative. And now for the bonus, I just wanted to throw this in there for this whole situation, is I would be going out there and putting in bids for whenever you have waivers run, whether that's tonight, sometime this week. Go put out a bid for a couple of these running backs on the Rams depth chart, because you never know what happens. I mean, Henderson could go down. One of them could just emerge. Last year we thought Fournette leaves, and then it's like Raquel Armstead, Devin Azigbo season, then James Robinson came out of nowhere. So there is always that outside chance. So I'd be going I have the depth chart on the screen now, but if I was going to take bets on them, I think the first one I'm most interested in is probably Jake Funk, then Calais, then I think Xavier Jones is his name. Otis Anderson, I'm not really too interested in him, but I'd be spreading out some bids on all of those guys to see what you can get. And that brings us to the end of our emergency press conference for the Cam Akers injury, which sucks, man. It sucks. He tore his Achilles. It's kind of a dark day in the fantasy community. It sucks, man. But let me know in the comments down below if you have a team with Cam Akers, what that outlook is looking like. And if you have Cam Akers on your team, I should have said this earlier, but if you have Cam Akers on your team and you're a contender, I'd be looking to move him for a first, and not only like a first, maybe even something like a Robert Woods and Odell Beckham. Something you can get some pieces to go out there and contend, because it's tough, man. I'd either try and sell him for some contending pieces, maybe try and get some like wide receiver, some older wide receiver ones, like maybe like a Cup, a Woods, something like that. If you can get like Woods, Odell Beckham, Woods, Tyler Lockett, something in that range, you know what I mean? Maybe even if you could like pay your way up to a Keenan Allen. On the flip side, though, I also don't mind the idea of just tearing it all down. If you're a contending team, you have Cam Akers, sell Cam Akers for a first, strip your veterans, maybe just go into this offseason, try and get the first overall pick, and then go out there, try and win 2022. But that's it for today. This video sucks to make. Expect a Michael Pittman video probably at the end of this week. I'm going to do a Michael Pittman sophomore breakdown. As always, you can follow me at @RonStore_ on Twitter. I love you guys, all you guys out there that had Cam Akers on your teams. I feel for you. I also had Cam Akers on, I have him on one of my Dynasty teams. I've had him in a couple spots. So today sucks, but also at the same time, I'm wishing Akers a speedy recovery. I'm also wishing, I hope that Akers proves me fucking wrong. I hope that, I'm saying sell him. I hope that he goes out there and proves me wrong, I think that'd be dope. But as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I mean, I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag, my kitty boots. I got the juice, I got the juice.
10-0, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on.